Hi, everybody. I'm just opening up the doors early to let people come on in. And everyone who is joining us, just so you know, you are muted. But if you want to just click on the panel, the GoToWebinar panel, and just type in there where it says to send your questions to the staff. If you want to just type in your name and where you're joining us from as we wait for the webinar to start, go ahead and do that. So if you can just go down to the question section, type in your name, and here we go. Great. I see Carl from London, Kentucky, Barb from WDAC. Hold on. Dawn from London, Kentucky, Julia from Tucson, Arizona, Prevention Project, Judy from Prevention Project in Alabama, Molly from Iowa, Joe and Mary. I'm going to just take this so I can see. Here we go. Asheville, North Carolina, Leslie from North Carolina, Laura from California, Henderson, Kentucky. We have Loretta from Dover, Delaware. I have Beth from Great Falls, Montana. Penny from Glenview. You're from the Northbrook Coalition for Youth in Glenville, Illinois. I'm just going to run through some of these. Angie from Kansas City. This is great, guys. Just keep coming on in and just go ahead and load up your name and where you're from. We're just so thrilled to have such a big crowd today. We got Patrice from New Jersey, Anita from Illinois, Brandy from Delaware, Kevin from Be Free Lake in Mount Dora, Florida, Jamie from Toledo, Ohio, Lisa from Louisville, Carol from Plymouth, New Hampshire, Katie from Somerville, New Jersey. All these East Coast people love it. I'm from Philly. Holly from Maine, Debbie from Oregon. We've got so many coming in, so fast and furious. So if I miss you, please just trying to take them in as fast as they come. Got a Gina from Alabama, Alice from New York, Michelle from Nebraska, Kendra, Kelly from Connecticut, Kathy from Liberty, Kentucky, Jason from Alabama. This is great, guys. So go ahead. We have about another minute before we go ahead and get started. And we will begin in just a moment. All right. Looks like the numbers have pretty settled down. It looks like everybody has come in. So welcome to Operation Parents webinar, e-cigarettes and teens, vaping, puffing, and dripping with our special guest presenter, Dr. Patricia Purcell. My name is Mary Beth Uberti, and I'm with Operation Parent, and I am the Director of Program Development here at Operation Parent. We are so happy to have you join us today for the 60-minute webinar on a very important topic. I know here in our own community, the use of e-cigs and vape products by our teens have been a great concern to our parents and schools. So this is a very important topic and very timely. For those of you that are new to Operation Parent, we are a parent-driven organization providing comprehensive prevention education and support resources for parents, caregivers, and organizations responsible for raising and guiding teens and preteens. So before we get into our content today, I would like to introduce my assistant, Michelle Massey, who will be helping out with the webinar controls today. So just give me a minute, Michelle, and we'll turn you on and go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. It's Michelle Massey with Operation Parent. I'm on the program development team, and I'm also raising two very strong, beautiful middle schoolers. And so this work is personal to me, and it means a lot. I'm just going to take you through a couple of features of the GoToWebinar system so you feel comfortable interacting with us today. First, you're going to see the orange grab tab at the top right of your screen. Feel free to open and close that as you need to throughout the webinar. I would like for you to tap on that now, though, and open it up so that you can see all of your options that you're going to be working with today. First, you'll see the question feature right under that orange grab tab. You're going to use that to submit questions at the end of the presentation. So we're going to queue you up when we want to make sure that we've got some questions in the queue for Dr. Pat Purcell, but you can also send those as they come to mind throughout the presentation today. And we really welcome those as a part of the interactive feature of today's work together. Secondly, we've got some great handouts lined up for you all today. We've got the E-Cig parent tip sheet. We've got the E-Cig and vaping website resources. We have a full copy of today's PowerPoint presentation. We also have a handout on juuling and cigarettes for the next generation. And so I would like for you to tap on all of those and go ahead and download them while we are live. You will get a backup copy of those, but if it's something that you want to have this evening, go ahead and tap on them and download them while we are live. Once we're not live, you won't have those active links anymore. I want to just thank you so much for joining us today and let you know that we are really excited to welcome over 400 participants to the webinar representing 270 different drug-free coalitions, as well as many parents and schools from across the country, representing over 44 states. So we're very excited with the number of folks that are interested to learn with Dr. Pat Purcell today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle, and I too would like to welcome you to the e-cigarettes and teens vaping, puffing, and dripping. I'm Dr. Pat Purcell. I'm a general pediatrician in private practice with East Louisville Pediatrics, and I also serve as president of the Kentucky chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So when I look at why tobacco prevention is important to me, I share, as well as the Kentucky chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, in supporting parents in keeping their children safe and healthy during the school years and recognizing programs that help adolescents build strong and healthy foundations. We really work together in helping to support actions to prevent children from using or being exposed to the vapor from not just vaping devices, but cigarettes. We do consider working with Operation Parent a strategic investment in building a healthy foundation for the future of our teens in the state of Kentucky. So our learning objectives today, the first one is we're going to discuss teen tobacco use. Then we're going to also identify e-cigarettes and vaping devices. And I'll have some slides that'll show you some of the different vaping devices as well as the nomenclature that's currently being utilized. We're going to review the prevalence and the health effects, and it's not just of cigarette smoking, but of course of vaping. We're going to try to understand teen nicotine addiction, and we're going to look toward the ability to look at it from two different venues. One, we're going to look at teen addiction in terms of nicotine, but we're also going to look at the adolescent brain and how that makes adolescents more vulnerable to nicotine and to addiction. Then we're going to offer you some parental strategies for the prevention of tobacco use, or if your child is already participating in tobacco products, we'll offer you some strategies to help them stop. So e-cigarettes and teens, well, e-cigarette use is gaining rapid popularity in both adolescents and adults. These devices are considered electronic nicotine delivery systems, i.e. ENDS, E-N-D-S. Now, ENDS are also called e-cigarettes, personal vaporizers, vape pens, e-cigars, e-hookah, or vaping devices, but irrespective to what they are called, they really are not a safe alternative to cigarette smoking. Our first objective is teen tobacco use. So today we will discuss teens' use of tobacco products, including why and what our teens are using. Now, this information then will better prepare us to counsel our teens on the risks and offer preventative strategies. What's important to point out today is the e-cigarette industry actually sees young people as the perfect replacement customer. They know if young people get hooked on their products early in life, They will have them as customers for years and possibly for their life. Tobacco use is a serious problem, so I think we should start with some of the basics, some basic information about tobacco use. Smoking harms nearly every organ of the body, and it affects a person's overall health. Cigarette smoking causes more than 480,000 deaths each year in the United States, and this actually represents 1 in 5 deaths. Smoking actually causes more deaths each year than the following causes combined: HIV, illegal drug use, alcohol use, motor vehicle injuries, as well as firearm-related incidents. Preventing tobacco use among youth is critical to ending the tobacco epidemic in the United States. Tobacco use actually is started and established primarily during adolescence. Nearly 9 out of 10 cigarette smokers actually first tried smoking by the age of 18, and each day in the United States, more than 3,200 youths age 18 years or younger smoke their very first cigarette, and an additional 2,100 youth and young adults become daily cigarette smokers. If we look at use under the age of 18, they're the customers who keep the tobacco companies in business. Tobacco companies really can't afford to target any other age group. Studies have shown that adults over the age of 18 are much less likely to pick up the habit. So some of the brands behind these new products are actually the same corporations that have produced traditional cigarettes. So the company that sells Cool cigarettes sells Blue, Marlboro sells Mark 10, and Camel sells Vuse. So Blue, Mark 10, and Vuse are all names for vaping devices. So basically, these big tobacco corporations are replacing their old cigarette customers with new customers around a younger age in the hopes of keeping them for life, and really by promoting a new product, a vaping product. If we look at a table from the 2017 CDC National Youth Tobacco Survey, what I want to point out is we have the red arrow showing you e-cigarettes, with e-cigarettes being the most common type of tobacco product that teens are definitely participating in this day. What's important to point out that is if you look to the right of the e-cigarettes, you'll see the cigarettes. And so if I was just looking at this and looked at the cigarette columns, I would say, oh, in 2017, it's down from 2016. 2016 down from 2015. And I would feel some sense of relief that, okay, cigarette smoking is going down. Unfortunately, as we point out in the column that's to the left, if you look and see, well, in 2015, there was a huge spike in e-cigarettes, a slight decrease then occurring in 2016, but in 2017, we're back up again. So what we're doing is we're trading adolescents who are definitely not smoking, but we see now this shift towards e-cigarettes. Our second objective is we want to identify e-cigarettes and vaping devices. And by being able to better identify e-cigarettes and vaping devices, we really will be better able to aid our children in resisting the influence of tobacco use, as well as limiting accessibility by addressing specifically the availability and the price of tobacco products. We really need to know what they are smoking. So besides the large aerosol cloud that you could be made with e-cigarettes and vaping devices, there are over 7,500 e-juice flavor options that they're marketing to lure new customers. And research recently suggests that flavors are actually pivotal for a certain percentage of teens and young adolescents as they choose to start vaping. We probably should ask ourselves, well, who do you think is most likely to be attracted by these flavor options? Well, it's not a coincidence that flavorings in tobacco products really can make them more appealing, and especially to our young adolescents. All right, so here's our electronic cigarettes. So vape devicing, vape pens, personal vaporizers. As I alluded to previously, electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, alternative nicotine delivery system, ANDS. So those are kind of your big headings. So I want to point first to the picture that's at the top to the left, and that shows the ruler. It shows next to it a USB port, and then next to that, the black linear device is a juuling device. And I point to this picture because, one, it shows you the size. It's about 3.5 inches in length. Two, it shows you the size in analogy to a USB port. So a juuling device, and they juuling devices actually got their name from JU is the juice that's utilized in the device. U is because it's the size of a USB port. And then L is because they have a lighted portion at the end. So again, if you look at this juuling device, it's small, it can be easily held in someone's hand, and someone can actually vape without people around them knowing that they're vaping. It's actually pretty alluring to somebody who wants to do what we call stealth vaping. It actually can be plugged into a computer just like a USB port, and subsequently then can be energized that way. If you look next to that, that's called a vaping silver vaporizer. It's a ripple pod system, and it's called a pod system because it has a larger container that contains more of the e-juice. Next to that is what's called a swirl and drop vape device. It's a unique device also because of the shape and the size. Again, this is touted as being one that is very alluring if you want to do stealth vaping. As you can appreciate, you can hold the red portion in your hand. The black portion at the top is what you can put in your mouth, and it can be held very inconspicuously in your hand. Unfortunately, you can also purchase covers for them, so you can actually personalize your vaping device, which again makes it more attractive to adolescents. If we go straight down from that, you can see that's called a SMPO. It's an ultra portable system, and it's a pod with a modification that can be utilized. It uses a salt-based nicotine system. It fits in your hand also, and it's actually touted as having round edges, no sharp edges, making it more comfortable in your hand. Unfortunately, the SMPO actually delivers 3 times the amount of vapor that's contained in a Juul device. And then to the left of that, we have various ultra portable. We have various personal vaporizers. You can see one that looks like a cigar. You can see the e-hookah stick pens. These are those small pen-like devices. You can see the mechanical mods. They're the 2 to the left, and then you can see actually the Ciga pens. Now remember, these smaller ones, the Ciga pens, and the e-hookah devices, they're small, they're cheap, comparatively speaking, and they're disposable. So again, it gives a way to attract adolescents to something. If they don't have a lot of money, they can purchase one of these smaller types of vaping devices. I think we need to look at the anatomy of an e-cigarette. So we'll go into the components. We'll do it separately over the next few minutes. So all of the vaping devices work with the same basic principle. There's a battery, that's your energy source. There's an atomizer that actually heats the solution. Now, remember that e-liquid flavoring may contain nicotine or it cannot, because it can be purchased either way. So what it does is then it creates this vapor, and it's a way then to activate the atomizer. Now, in most, there's a vacuum sensor that activates the atomizer, but in some, you actually need to push a button to allow that atomizer to work. So it's not a big functional difference, but it's just 2 different ways of doing it. So again, if we look at one, we can see that's where the sensor detects when the smoker takes a drag. That basically sends the signal to the processor, switches on the heater, and then what you have is the atomizer then heats the solution, and then it subsequently can be inhaled. Now, when you look at 3, that's where basically on some of these devices, there's an LED device that actually lights up when we do the atomization. And what that does is it simulates then an actual cigarette, again, making it more alluring for someone to look like a cigarette, but not be a cigarette. Most tobacco users start before the age of 21. In fact, 95% of adult smokers actually started before the age of 21. Tobacco use during youth has immediate health consequences. You can have chronic bronchitis, chronic sinusitis, you can have foul breath, you can have production of mucus, significant lung irritation. If someone has underlying asthma, we can appreciate that that just then reinforces and enforces the more significant consequences that can occur. It accelerates the development of chronic diseases over the lifespan. As we all are aware, tobacco use can cause cancer, lung cancer, oropharyngeal cancer. It can cause chronic lung disease, yellowing of the teeth, wrinkling of the skin. There's a whole host of consequences that can occur. If a person, though, can make it to age 21 without using their first tobacco product, it's really unlikely that they will ever become a smoker. So this is our first generation cig-alike. So these are AK called the minis. So examples would be the Blue, the Logic, the Vuse, and the Mark 10. So remember, as we look at the names, Cool produces blue, Marlboro, Mark 10, and Camel produces Vuse. So again, these small e-cigarettes are made with a battery, an atomizer, a heating coil, an absorbent material that absorbs the liquid. And again, it can contain nicotine, or it can contain flavoring without the nicotine. The battery, again, allows the atomizer to heat the liquid. Again, that's called the e-juice, creates an aerosol that is then breathed into the lungs and then breathed out into the surrounding environment. Some of these devices are preloaded. Some of them you actually add the e-juice to. Now, the original e-cigarettes, the vape pens, actually looked like a cigarette, though you can see in the upper right-hand corner, it came preloaded, and as I mentioned before, was disposable. So our second generation are the tank system. So these can be considered personal vaporizers, mid-size, or vape pens. So the tank systems really were an improvement in their design to consistently deliver more aerosol. It's also made up of a battery. It has an atomizer, but it has a tank, which then holds the large volume. And some of them can hold anywhere from 5 to 10 ml of the e-liquid juice, again, containing nicotine or not containing nicotine. It has a manual heating button. It then preheats the atomizer coil. What's frightening is that some of these have a tunable voltage. So a larger voltage can then create a heating projection that can occur very rapidly. It is purchased in a kit form, so it then becomes more easy to customize it, again, making it more alluring to our adolescents. And it allows users the ability to manipulate and deliver the amount of nicotine, the dose that they're receiving with each use. Third generation mods are really more advanced personal vaporizers. So users can actually modify them to adjust their vaping preferences. These are called the Apollo, the Henley, or the Volcano. Now, they're the most advanced form of e-cigarettes. They're actually preferred by hobbyists, again, simply because they are so customizable. They have a rechargeable lithium ion battery, and they really don't look anything like a traditional e-cigarette. So Juul, that is our big player. That is what is currently on the market, what the majority of adolescents and teenagers are now utilizing. And Juuling has really created its own terminology. Its appeal has become so ingrained in the social culture of our adolescents now that really they've created a verb for it, i.e. Juuling. Juul was initially brought to market to offer an alternative for adults to cigarette smoking by offering the nicotine in a vaping form. Unfortunately, it's created a storm of activity with interest in use by adolescents. Juuling produces a thick, consistent vapor. It packs the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes into a tiny liquid cartridge for better nicotine blood absorption, for a quicker fix. And users can actually get what's called NIC-RIPPed, N-I-C-R-I-P-P-E-D, so NIC-RIPPed, and that's multiple hits of the Juuling device, subsequently getting a large amount of nicotine, which gives an invariable buzz off of it. Each cartridge, again, contains the same amount of nicotine as one pack of cigarettes and delivers approximately 200 hits. Flavors include mango, mint, fruit medley, creme brulee. Cost can be anywhere between $35 to $50. And Juuling is highly addictive, with the amount of nicotine contained double the concentration that's found in other e-cigarettes. It has a specific system. It has the nicotine salt system, which is what Juul is actually known for. And then it has an additional benzoic acid component. This might be why the reason that teenagers like the Juuling device so much. Supposedly, the benzoic acid takes some of the burn off of the throat that we sometimes or people can appreciate with other smoking devices. So again, it makes it more alluring. They can basically have the hit and the buzz off a cigarette without the discomfort that occurs with it. Juul, the corporation that owns Juuling, actually has a patent on their formula with the benzoic acid, so it's really unknown what acid is in it and what other nicotine salt solutions are contained. I want to point out to you, Juuling was first introduced in 2015. In 2017, the sales of Juuling were approximately $454 million, and it has anywhere from 32 to 54% of the market. The company itself is currently valued at $3 billion. And the reason I mention it is because recognize that all of us as caregivers of adolescents are up against a $3 billion corporation that is trying to sell our adolescents a product that we don't want them to have. Vape pens are another type of vaping device. It looks like an e-cigarette also. It dispenses nicotine if you put that in it. But these devices actually are more optimized for utilization with marijuana. It is able to distribute a higher concentration of THC. So really, these vaporizer pens can be used for any type of vaping material that someone would want to utilize. If we look at the prevalence and the health effects, that's going to be our next objective. E-cigarettes are sold everywhere: vape shops, convenience stores, gas stations, retail outlets, mall kiosks, grocery stores, and then, of course, internet vendors. I wanted to point out this is a study that was done by the 2017 Kentucky Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And if we look at the percentage of high school students who ever used an electronic nicotine device divided by sex, grade, and racial ethnicity, you can see that males have a slightly larger number than females. And when we look at the grades, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade has a more significant amount of adolescents who are participating. If we look at the percentage of high school students who currently use an electronic device, again, sex, grade, race, ethnicity, again, you have more of a male predominance. And again, we see that 12th grade mark being quite a bit more elevated than 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So why do teens use cigarettes? Well, they desire new experiences we can appreciate. Some of the top reasons: they're curious. The flavors, we just alluded to the flavors. We alluded to the way that there's 7,500 flavors that adolescents can utilize. There are social reasons. Remember, as they desire these new experiences, as adolescents deal with problems at school, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's wanting to fit in, sometimes peer pressure can create that environment. Perception of health, unfortunately, is very high because, again, adolescents don't recognize the risk factor that's associated with the utilization of e-cigarettes. What are the ingredients that are actually advertised as being in our end solution, our e-juice? Well, there's the humectant, that's the propylene glycol, the vegetable glycerin. This is what makes the vapor actually plume. There's flavoring, and as I alluded to before, it may or may not contain nicotine. Now, what are the ingredients that are actually found in an end solution? Well, again, your humectant, your flavoring, your nicotine, but multiple toxicants, multiple carcinogens, poisonous metal products, particles. You can appreciate you're heating a coil, there's going to be little pieces that are going to come off, and then we inhale it, and subsequently they're going to be distributed in our lung. We have the silsates, and people add other psychoactive ingredients, as we alluded to. Marijuana is one that is more rapidly utilized. So the label really does not always match what is in the product. E-cigarettes can be used to vaporize the marijuana. Electronic marijuana devices are often called dab pens, D-A-B-P-E-N-S. And when you look at this, I think it's important. The top on the left, you can see those look just like pens. They look like pens that you would just take the top off of it. When you look down directly beneath that, those three, the purple, the green, and the silver, they look like vaping devices, vaporizers, basically, that you use if you have asthma that you would inhale with. And then you can get these complete sets, and you can get an AM set or a PM set. So again, multiple ways to be attractive to our adolescents. So what are the harms? What are the health harms of e-cigarettes? Well, e-cigarettes, vape pens allow the user to make these large clouds of smoke. Many think are just water vapor, but in reality, the cloud is a mixture of many different chemicals that were either present in the e-liquid before or produced after the heating process occurred. A vapor is a chemical that has actually evaporated, and an aerosol is actually a mixture of liquid particles that are suspended in a gas, and that can contain many chemicals. So instead of just mixing it with the air like a pure gas, aerosols then can leave drops behind, which, remember, then that puts at risk people that are standing around the individuals that are vaping. So simply put, e-cigarettes produce an aerosol. It contains harmful chemicals and toxins, many known to cause cancer. Nicotine itself, we know, is a highly addictive compound. And while not all the e-juice contains nicotine, all of them have these chemicals and toxins. So in the recent past, e-liquid was actually federally unregulated and was often mislabeled. But as of August 8, 2016, the FDA began regulating all tobacco products, including e-cigarettes and vape pens and e-liquid, by bringing them under the umbrella and expanding the definition of tobacco products. Unfortunately, since these products are so new, there's simply not enough information to fully understand the possible health risks. Let's look at the public health harms. Kids who use e-cigarettes are more likely to progress to cigarette use. E-cigarettes, again, as we alluded to, use sweet flavors to attract children, and it renormalizes smoking. Remember, there are many places in the Louisville community throughout the United States where smoking is not allowed, it's banned, but e-cigarettes can be utilized in that environment. Also, when we look, advertising has been completely unrestricted for vaping devices, whereas for cigarettes, you can't advertise, whether TV ads, anything along that line. So again, it's made it pretty normalized, which is not what we want. And you can see it's largely indistinguishable from a cigarette. If we look at this gentleman here, it looks like he's actually smoking a cigarette. E-cigarettes really are and can be the bridge that introduces non-users to nicotine use and addiction. If we look at the 2016 U.S. Surgeon General's report, e-cigarettes are rapidly emerging. It's a diverse product class. Its use among youth and young adults is a public health concern. E-cigarettes are most commonly used tobacco product associated with the use of other tobacco products. And of course, just to reiterate, the use of nicotine is a danger to youth, pregnant women, and fetuses, and can lead to addiction and harm. I think it's important to point out too, some adolescents really actually vape in classrooms now. In fact, there is a whole genre of Twitter memes that talks to you about how you can successfully vape in a bathroom. So understanding teen nicotine addiction. So again, we're going to look at it from the addiction properties of nicotine, but we're also going to look at it from the adolescent brain. So adolescence is a critical window in brain development. The brain's still developing until about the age of 25. And during this developmental window, the brain develops rapidly and is highly vulnerable to being shaped by the environment and outside sources. The fact that an adolescent brain is still growing and there's an imbalance among the developing brain system means that adolescents really are more vulnerable to addiction. So when you look at this picture of the brain, most of the activity in the adult brain is in the frontal lobe. That's our thinking, our reasoning, our planning. So that's the purple area. Most of the activity in the teen brain, though, is focused in the center, which is the pleasure reward center. So accordingly, adolescents lack the mature adult capacity for self-regulation because the brain system that influences pleasure-seeking and emotional reactivity develops more rapidly than the brain system that supports self-control. Judgment is the last to develop. So when I look at this slide, these are MRI pictures of the brain. We've been fortunate to have more research done on MRIs and utilization, and so subsequently we can get some pretty good ideas of how the brain is developing. So when you look at the red-yellow areas, those are parts of the brain that are less fully mature. The blue-purple are parts of the brain that are more fully mature. So if you look at a 5-year-old brain, you would anticipate definitely you're going to have more red-yellow. It's going to be less fully mature. When you look at the preteen brain, we can see that there is some level of maturation that's occurring. But again, the preteen brain is predominantly immature. The teen brain, you start to see, again, more of the maturation, the blue-purple. Again, quite a bit of the brain being less fully mature with the red-yellow. But here, look at the 20-year-old brain. Definitely, there's maturity, but there still is, I think, a considerable part that's less fully mature. So even in the 20-year-old brain, there's continues to be immature executive functioning occurring. So what is nicotine? Nicotine is present in tobacco leaves in large amounts. It exists in other plants. It's highly toxic. It's used to be a bug killer. It's highly addictive. So exposure to nicotine in low doses very quickly increases the number of receptors that exist in the cell or group of cells in response to the tobacco. So basically, I don't have to be utilizing a large amount of tobacco. I can utilize a small amount. It markedly increases my receptor. Remember, when I have a large number of receptors, I'm going to want more of that nicotine. So that's very problematic for us. If we look at nicotine and the developing adolescent brain, just to put the two pieces together, the prefrontal cortex is still developing. Remember, that's our decision making, our impulse control, it's our executive functioning. Our adolescent brain, again, we can see is really uniquely vulnerable to this addiction. Again, we become addicted more quickly, lower levels of use are necessary, and addiction occurs when adolescents we know are experimenting. The earlier use of cigarettes is associated with an earlier addiction, a greater risk of progressing to daily smoking, and basically it's harder for an adolescent to quit. Late adolescence we know is critical. Ages 18 to 21 is a critical period when many smokers move from experimental to regular tobacco use. 54% of adult smokers become daily smokers before the age of 18. 85% of adult smokers become daily smokers before the age of 21. I think that's pretty sobering. Teens are more uniquely vulnerable to nicotine addiction, as we've alluded to. So we know nicotine's addictive. We know that there's benzoic acid that's contained in Juuls that pairs with the nicotine that helps them to transfer high amounts of nicotine to the adolescent brain. We have the glycerol and the propylene glycol present in the e-juice products. So with Juuling, remember, 1 Juul pod is equal to a pack of cigarettes in nicotine content. We know that Juuling produces a very quick head rush that's actually stronger than smoking a cigarette. And again, 1 pod can last about a half a day to more than 2 and delivers the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So let's look at some parental strategies for intervention. What can we offer you? How can we help you? Well, be aware. I commend everyone who is listening to this webinar because I think the first way to address this is for us to be educated. How can we help? How can we prevent our adolescents if we don't know what they're using or what they're talking about? So again, I commend you for participating in this. You're going to be better educated and subsequently better able to help your teens, whether it's a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a group leader, whatever exposure you have to adolescents. Remember that these e-cigarettes, we know what they look like, but they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They can resemble household products. So if you have one, it looks like a USB port. Know the language, be aware of the language of teens in your community. E-cigarettes, again, they could be called Vape Pens, Juuling, mods. And I would encourage you, look into your community. If you have surrounding convenience stores, if you have someplace that you would see that vaping devices are sold, look to see what they're selling. Remember, these stores are only going to keep in stock what is rapidly being sold in the environment. So that would alert you, hey, in my community, it looks like Juuling is the bigger player, or it looks like people are customizing. So I would encourage you, go to some of these places and see what they have so that you know what people are using in your community. Talk with your teen, be open, non-judgmental. You can ask about, have they seen e-cigarettes? Do they know about e-cigarettes? You can also use this webinar as a point of entry. You know, I was watching a webinar on e-cigarettes. It was really informative. Do you know anything about it? Do you know anybody that's doing it? And I caution you, do not ask your teenager, are you smoking? And then anticipate that they're going to give you a yes or no answer that's going to give you what you want. So basically what I mean is you're wanting to know, are they vaping? You really need to ask a teenager, are you smoking or are you vaping? Because teenagers do not think that they're the same thing. They think that they're two separate entities. So a teenager, very likely, if you say, are you smoking? They would say no. They're very honest. They're not lying to you. It's simply that they think that vaping is separate. So you must ask, are you vaping? Are you Juuling? Do you know about that? Again, remember, smoking and vaping are two different entities to a teenager. Make them aware of the e-cigarettes, that they contain nicotine. talk about the risk of addiction, frame addiction as the loss of independence, of course, and focus on the expense of vaping and the risk of progressing to smoking. Be supportive of your teen, help them, of course, to make healthy choices. Advise your teen to avoid e-cigarettes and any kind of tobacco products. Talk through scripts. How can they answer if a peer or someone talks to them about vaping? Hey, do you want to vape? What would be their answer? And help them develop a plan of action so that they can turn it down. Be supportive of your teen also if they're already smoking. So if your child already uses tobacco, again, whether it's in a vaping or cigarette device, give them reasons to quit. Discuss the expense, the impact on their athletic performance. Talk about short-term, preterm skin wrinkling, yellow teeth, the chronic bronchitis, everything that I alluded to. Help them quit successfully. Provide social support. Get rid of cigarettes in the household. Come up with alternative activities for them to be able to do when they have this urge, this need to smoke, whether again it's vaping or cigarette devices. And of course, if other family members use tobacco, consider quitting together. Get outside help. I can't convey to you the importance of talking to your physician, whether it's a pediatrician, a family physician, whatever physician. We are qualified and we have valuable resources that we can offer you. So as a parent, again, as a caregiver of an adolescent, please utilize us. We are there to help you. You can do 1-800-QUIT-NOW, that's for adults, and then there's the www.teensmokefree.gov for teenagers. So the bottom line is e-cigarettes are not safe. Clean air is safe. E-cigarettes may lead to cigarette use. Cigarette use causes disease and early deaths. And the best course of action is don't start. Educate yourself and your family since you now know a lot about e-cigarettes. I do want to give you one piece of information that just was published August the 23rd, just a few days ago. So this month in mid-September, the FDA will actually start looking at more preventative strategies with vaping. They're going to roll out a campaign targeting about 10 million youths who either vape or think about it. And then as of, again, August 23rd, all 17 companies that previously had received an FDA warning letter in May have ceased marketing e-cigarette liquids with packaging that resembles the child-friendly food products such as candies, cookies, and juice with packaging. So basically they're getting rid of that. And again, that's because the FDA recognizes the need and they're trying to be as aggressive as possible. Additional resources you have on a national level, we have, of course, the American Academy of Pediatrics Tobacco Resources, the Richmond Center of Excellence, as well as the healthychildren.org. There are wonderful handouts that you can download off of this. There are one-page informational handouts that can be downloaded, that can be understood by anyone. In fact, even a teenager that's looking at it can understand it. So I would encourage you to get on there, peruse what they have available, and find what maybe works in your community or for your organization. And then, of course, Kentucky resources. We have the Kentucky AAP. Again, we have resources available for you on our website. The Norton Healthcare has the free smoke-free program for children and adolescents 18 and above. And then the Quit Now Kentucky, which gives you online services with free availability of coaches and a personalized program.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Purcell. Okay, for right now, go ahead and put your questions in. If you have any other questions for Dr. Purcell, also the handout section on your panel, if you click on that, you will see the 4 handouts. Take the time now to download them before I shut it down. I'm going to shut it down in about another 15 minutes. But while we are on, you can download. Also, we will send all handouts out in an email immediately following this presentation. We normally do it ahead of time. We had some technical difficulties this morning and that did not happen, so I apologize. If you want them now, you can go ahead and download them. But I do encourage you to take a look in your email afterwards and you will see the handouts come to you. Also keep in mind tomorrow you will receive the recording of this webinar for you to use. And if you are in a coalition or a school or parents, please feel free to go ahead and forward that link on to friends, to your organizations. We would love to have people to watch the webinar and continue to spread the information and education. I'm just going to go through some information on Operation Parent, and then we'll turn it and open it to questions. For those of you, please stay informed with Operation Parent. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Sign up for our e-newsletter. You can do that at operationparent.org. Purchase our handbooks, we'll talk about in a moment, and we also provide community presentations and continue to attend our webinars. Our next webinar will be 5 strategies to raise a drug-free kid on Wednesday, September 26th. From 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I will be doing that presentation, and you can register at operationparent.org. These are our handbook, our parent handbooks. We have an elementary version, which is just gives you a chance to start reading what should I be talking to with my kids in the elementary school age. So anything from start talking about alcohol use in a very different way than you would in middle school and high school, but to start that conversation. Definitely start talking about smoking, but also setting the boundaries, cell phone use. And then we have our middle and high school, which is a more robust handbook going over all these topics in a one-page spread, giving you trends, misconceptions, and warning signs. Where do I go for more help? You can purchase these online at our site, and we do ship them in bulk. So if you're interested in that, please go on to our site. Parent presentations, I do presentations to parents at schools, conferences, but I also do presentations for students. If you are interested, again, go back to our site at www.operationparent.org, click on the link that says what we do, and you will see the drop down for community presentations. You can fill in that form and send it to me, and I will go ahead and get back in touch with you. So with that, I'm going to just go to our back up here and take a look and see what questions we have here for Dr. Purcell. Okay. All right, let me go through these. Okay, hold on, Dr. Purcell. And some of these, if we don't get to all these questions, we will email them to Dr. Purcell and get those answered for you. We got a lot of questions here. Hold on. All righty. All right. I think some of these okay, what are the medical concerns over the ones that do not have nicotine included? Are there different medical concerns, Dr. Purcell?
Can you hear me, Mary Beth?
Yes, sure can.
Okay, so that's an excellent question. And part of it is because we don't know everything right now. We don't know exactly, again, juuling, because of the patent that they have on their liquid, on their solution, we don't know everything that's contained in it. So a lot of this is we're surmising that while it doesn't have the nicotine in it, if you're using an e-juice product that doesn't have nicotine, it still has the chemicals, and we do think that those chemicals do have some toxic properties. That's why it's an excellent question. This is something that's evolving. Again, juuling just started 2015, so the FDA has not even remotely had a chance to catch up. I think that anything anyone puts in their lungs is going to have some toxic effect, that unless of course it's a medication like an inhaler for someone with asthma. So the toxic component is definitely there, but the long-term implications I just can't answer at this time. But that's a really, really good question.
All right, thank you. Next question is, can you speak to the withdrawal symptoms and what the teen body experiences should they stop juuling or using E-Cigs without a cessation program, without cessation support?
That's another really good question. From what we have seen, adolescents, some of them tolerate it very well and some of them do not. So some of them will get shaky, they'll get headaches, they'll get what we call diaphoretic, i.e. sweaty. They're very uncomfortable, they're nauseous. And so that's again why I think talking to your physician, and if this is an issue, this is what we're going to try to quit. How can we quit? It's probably not as significant as someone that has had of course, a prolonged cigarette addiction, but it definitely is going to have some of the similar symptomatology. And these adolescents really are just not going to feel well. So looking at something that could be utilized as a replacement in terms of an activity or chewing gum or something along that line is appropriate, but they're going to have physical symptoms when they stop using it if they've been using it with any kind of frequency.
Okay. It's just a comment. In terms of language, our kids in Connecticut are calling vaping ripping. So I've not heard that term. Have you heard that term,
Well,
Dr.
it could,
Purcell?
because some of the devices are ripple pods.
Ah,
So that's the
okay.
name. So they call it ripping. That's why some people say, I'm modding, modding, but that's because they have a device that maybe has modifications to it. So they tend to take, again, going back to the juuling, they create their own terminology based on what they're utilizing. So
Okay.
there is a ripple pod system, and that's why they call it ripping.
Okay. Someone is asking, what is the age limit to buy e-cigs, in particular the Juul? Do you know what the age limit is?
Well, I can tell you what it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to be in that 18 to 21 range, depending on, of course, where you live. Unfortunately, appreciate people can purchase them, children can purchase them off the internet, and all they have to do is check a box and say, yes, I'm 18 or yes, I'm 21, and they can actually get them that way. So while there is definitely an age limit on when you can purchase it, as we all know, some of these adolescents are getting it. In fact, that was one of the big pushes recently from the FDA. They went around and tried to close down different facilities. They targeted some areas and went into these kiosks and found that they were selling them. So I think they've alerted convenience stores. They've alerted kiosks that, yes, you really need to be careful who you sell it to. But because it's so available, I think adolescents are getting them irrespective of the age limitation.
Okay. What does the term dripping mean? I don't know that that got touched on.
Well, it's pretty much just vaping, dripping, and puffing. So dripping is more that it is an aerosolized solution. You have these drips that occur, so to speak. It's not so much that you're actually dripping at the device. It's part of the whole genre of vaping.
Okay. Do you have have you talked to any schools about a successful strategy to limit the use in schools?
No, I haven't. I would probably, if I did, I would suggest that definitely you start with education. And unfortunately, there's going to have to be some momentum of being able to police individuals, police these adolescents in terms of, watching them. Because again, if you've got something in your hand, you're not going to be able to know. A teacher can't always look at the class and say, oh, this is what's going on. So first there'd be education, but then there's going to be and has to be some sort of mechanism to be able to watch these adolescents in the class to see if they're actually doing it or not.
Yeah, I know with the schools in our area, there has been a big push. It seemed like last year and the year toward the end of the year prior, where there was a lot of kids using them on the buses, in between classes, in the hallway, in class, and then in the bathrooms. I am aware that some schools have really cracked down on allowing the bathrooms to be open and which bathrooms the kids can go into so they can really monitor. Confiscation of the devices take place immediately when they're found. So I think, to maybe go to your individual schools and find out what their policies are and how they are managing that. I just can tell you the experiences we've been hearing as I go to schools.
Well, I think,
Um,
Mary Beth, that's appropriate too, because that sets the tone that this is
yes,
not going to be allowed here, that I could get in trouble if I do it. And I think that is incredibly important. And then you take away the ability to be stealth in your vaping, i.e., you can't go to the bathroom willy-nilly. You can't sit at the back
right.
of the class and just kind of putz. We're watching what you're doing.
Yes, and something else to keep in mind is your child, your teen, I guess, may not actually have the vape device in their possession, but I do know what was happening at schools around here was they were pulling the money, getting the vape device, and or the jewel actually, and then they were stashing the jewel black stick in the bathroom and the pods. So the kids would then let each other know where it was, go into the bathroom, smoke, take a few puffs of it, go back to class, and the information was passed on. So even though you may not find the actual vaping device or the e-cigarette in your child's possession, it's really important to have the conversation because somebody else may have it and they're sharing it. So just keep that in mind. Um, Here's another question. Do you know if there have been any legislative movement regarding bringing vaping and e-juice in line with the Tobacco Control Act guidelines, thereby allowing the FDA to ban kid-friendly flavoring as they did with tobacco?
That's currently in the works, and that's what I was alluding to. I mean, the first step has been the ability to look at the advertising, which was just passed, and so apparently then there's going to be limitations on that. Because in 2016 the FDA has placed e-cigarettes and the juice under their guidelines in terms of it, there is going to be further regulation. So I do think that there is. In terms of specifics, it's really going to depend on what they're going to be able to do, and what Scott Gottlieb seems to be pretty aggressive with looking at what can be done. But yes, there is. I feel comfortable telling you there is legislation that will be hopefully coming to pass. But again, remember, we're against a $3 billion corporation, and that sometimes is a little bit difficult to think about.
Okay, and here's a question. How do you deal with those who say nicotine is safe and that it is the tar in the cigarettes that is the real danger?
Personally, there's some things that I'm kind of adamant about in terms of I can try to explain certain things to my patients or to my own children. And there's some things that I say I just can't. And so smoking with nicotine is bad for you. How I relegate bad in terms of, oh, you get some tar or you get some nicotine, I don't even go there because I think it's just bad for you. So I think that we have to take that kind of stance when someone tries to differentiate the two, because I think it's very hard to say, oh, well, okay, so if you do this, they might have tar in it, or this might have just the nicotine component. So I would encourage, if someone tries to address that, just say, look, it's bad, you're putting it in your lungs. That really is end of story.
Okay. Is there any feel or film with the vapor on kids' clothing, on themselves? So doing laundry, does it smell or feel sticky? Does it smell like a perfume? Would a parent be able to smell it on their clothing? Because obviously with real cigarettes, yeah, you can smell it.
That's a really good question also. I think that sometimes there is an odor that's associated with it, but I don't know if it would last long enough that if someone vaped in the morning, that when a parent saw it on their clothing or did their laundry, that they would actually be able to smell the substance on there. If you're around someone that's actually vaping, sometimes it does smell a little bit, but remember, it's really more the taste that's associated with it. So it's the creme brulee is not because we smell this burnt sugar smell. It really is that's what it tastes. So it really is more what the individual that's vaping is getting versus the outside community. So there might be some, but I don't think it's personally, I don't think it's enough that someone's going to be able to pick that up.
Unfortunately, as a
Yes.
parent, unfortunately.
Yes.
Can you add any information about popcorn lung disease, which I have heard is linked to many of the flavored vape liquids?
I apologize. I cannot. I'd be more than happy to look into that. I'm not for sure what that is alluding to.
Okay. I'm just looking through to see if there's
Okay.
any other. Somebody's asking, will you be presenting on how kids are adding THC oils to e-cigarettes? Actually, we are working with an organization called SAM, And that presentation, I believe, will be in October, and I'm pretty sure we'll be hitting that with the marijuana use in the e-cigarette vaping delivery systems. Could you also go again, what does the JUUL stand for? What are those, what's the acronym for JUUL again?
Yes, JU is for the juice. So that's where they got the JU. And then the next U is for the size because it's comparatively size-wise to a USB port. And then L is because of the lighting device that's on the end of it. Again, remember that makes it more alluring. Tends to look like a cigarette. And as I said, because these teenagers don't think that smoking and vaping are the same thing, they think they're two separate entities. They don't transfer the risks to vaping that they know, or a lot of them know, occurs with smoking.
We're going to go with maybe one or two more questions here. One is asking if you're trying to help your teen stop using these devices, do you recommend a nicotine patch?
If for some of them, yes, I would. Yes, it would depend on how frequent they were actually vaping, how much nicotine that they were vaping. Now, remember, you can't give a specific amount of nicotine per se, but if they're vaping with a consistent and every time they vape, they're using a nicotine substance versus a substance that doesn't have nicotine, yes, I would tell you that that would be something to consider. And definitely talk into the physician. Their physician, personal physician, would be the first entry to look at some sort of a replacement therapy.
Okay, and I have some people that gave us some information on popcorn lung. They're saying that is linked to the glycerol in the e-juice, and popcorn lung disease is bronchitis. I cannot pronounce this other one. Obliterans?
Oh, obliterans. Yes,
Okay.
yes, obliterants, bronchitis obliterans.
Okay.
Well, thank you for cueing me on that. I was not aware of, so thank you.
Is there a prevention strategy being developed to approach vendors of e-cigarettes?
Mary Beth, I'm not for sure what, is there a
I think
prevention strategy?
is there maybe some kind of, I guess what the question is there anything that maybe the FDA is doing or something like that to talk to the vendors of e-cigarettes to stop, to really make them more aware maybe of selling to youth or the dangers, I guess? I don't
Yes,
know of
well,
it.
yes, so
Go ahead.
and I'll revert back to the published data that just came out 8/23, looking at how the FDA was successful in getting them to stop packaging it, because initially the boxes that people were purchasing these flavoring substances, the e-juice in, look like a pack of cookies, or they look like chocolate milk or something along
Right.
that line. So that the 17 companies they went to at first said, well, it doesn't really, we didn't mean it to look like that. And of course, we're all very skeptical of that. So that supposedly now is going to be changed and removed. So I think they're making inroads. But again, the hard part that I think all of us have to recognize is that we are dealing against corporations that are making a tremendous amount of money off what they're doing. So just like it was initially with the tobacco companies make a great deal of money. And so it's very hard. They can back off, they can back down slightly, but the goal they have is to their shareholders, and that's to make a great deal of money.
Okay. All right. We have one comment, and then somebody sent a link about popcorn lung. Thank you, Susan. And I'll try to get that into the email that I send out afterwards with the handouts. Susan has stated that students in our school district have been prescribed the nicotine patch to deal with their JUUL addiction. Also, there are certain flavors that are associated with popcorn lung. It is not just from the glycerin. Okay. Well, with that, I like to thank Dr. Purcell for sharing all this information. For those of you that I did not go through your questions, I will forward them to Dr. Purcell when she has the opportunity. She'll answer you via email. But thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Purcell, and all of your time and getting everything ready for today. We really appreciate it. And we've had a great turnout for today's webinar. Again, the recording will go out tomorrow. So for those of you that are on live, you will receive this recording tomorrow. Please feel free to share the link with your communities, with your schools. of this recording. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut down for today. Thank you so much.